Welcome. And as you come on into the room, please let us know that you can see and hear us. Today in history, John Glenn is the first American to orbit the Earth in Friendship 7. And our good friend, the $6 Million Man, premiered in 1974. So let me know that you can see and hear me. Oh, you can't hear me? All right, before we kick it off, how's the sound? Sound is good? Oh, okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hello, Katie. Hello, Sarah. Hello, Sarah. How you been? Right? Let's give it one more minute. We'll kick off. But that's the story of today's opening slide. Try to do something interesting, right? It's funny, different versions of that slide. The first version, he looked a lot like Lee Majors. This one, not so much. Oh, Lynn, how did you survive Fat Tuesday? Busy week. Who is who? The $6 Million Man, Donna? My goodness. Even in rural Minnesota or rural Oregon with a antenna, you would have picked up the $6 Million Man. All right, everybody, I'm going to kick this off. Welcome, everyone. All right, so welcome to today's program. Whoops, did we hit record? Hey, everybody, welcome to today's program, episode 114 of the weekly tax update for February 20th. If you don't get the meaning of this, today in history, John Glenn orbited the Earth, first American to orbit the Earth, 1962 aboard Friendship 7. And in 1974, the $6 Million Man premiered, starring Lee Majors. That's who the fellow on the right is supposed to be, Lee Majors. Also ironic that the $6 Million Man is based on the novel Cyborg, for those who are keeping track of these things. If you need to find me, this is me. Scan that QR code with your phone, populates your phone contact details with all my most interesting details if you need to find me. Finally, the IRS is caught up. And this morning from late last night, I had numbers in here for February 13th because they've been either not posting or posting really late. And finally today, midday, these numbers were available, so we were able to get them into the slide deck. So these are today's numbers, most recently reported by our friends at the Internal Revenue Service. So what's going on? Delays, backlogs. Most embarrassing thing ever. Still, they're just going to get further behind. I can't wait till March when we're going to be 20 months behind again. Form 14039, identity theft affidavit, is currently processing cases submitted in July of 24. Business ones are December of 24. But they just took a 3-month jump over the last 2 weeks. Boom, boom, boom. So maybe they're doing something. Some of these other numbers are going to be interesting as well. Original returns submitted on paper. They're processing January returns. There's been no movement in the last 4 weeks. It's been January. Amended paper returns that are on paper. November of 25. So this entire last 6.5 weeks, 7 weeks, they've only moved 1 month forward. So they're getting further behind, and that of course is a combination of the IRS shutdown period, and it was a little bit in the late start to this year's season. Business return processing, 21 days for electronic returns for the current year. 1120s paper filed. January 25 is in process. and May of 25 for amended returns. There's been no movement in the last month on those 1120 paper returns. And you are correct. That is 1 year behind. This is the official guidance, so which means it could be worse. Form 1041, they're processing on paper January of 2026. Amended returns May of 2025. All right. I'm not going to buy 941s. Don't make sense to me. I'm thinking we're going to drop this. If anybody has a reason for me not to drop this reporting, I will. But we're going to drop this because it seems like behind, and then as soon as the quarter ends, they process a whole bunch of stuff. So amended return number, maybe we'll continue to report that because, again, that's nearing a year behind. This doesn't include ERC claims, which they actually aren't processing anymore. You missed the submission date. Now, this is super important to those of you that are EAs, CPAs, attorneys, annual filing season providers, or folks who submit 8821s for their clients. It was 2 business days. I put it up on the internet this morning. That was the number yesterday, but today, 1 business day. They're saying now their goal for decades, years, was 5 business days after receipt, and now 1 business day. It's amazing. So, of course, I put the bottom on February 6th, the reported number was 5 days. February 13th, it was 2 days. Now it's 1 day. So social proof, that's when, you go to buy something and you see all those reviews in the bottom. These pants are great. This hairpiece is great. Well, I went to social proof. So so power of attorney and authorization forms, quote of the day. It's obscured a little bit. Maybe it's obscured in your screen as well. So I had posted that screenshot that you just saw, and I said, "Is this true? I haven't submitted any this week. Are we that well?" Yes. All these people telling me yes. This one, thank you for the confirmation. This is great that it's efficient. Love, likes. Down at the bottom, quote of the day. Yup, 1 to 2 days. Now I have to resubmit all my older, unprocessed ones that they threw away to catch up from that 5-day mark. Chad, he's half serious there, but that's very interesting observation, maybe. W7 apps are pretty much current. Form 8802, pretty much current. The one thing I find interesting, though, is you're not supposed to submit your 2026 requests until January. So if they're processing stuff from 2025, does that suggest that they are way behind? We'll see how soon they get to the January ones, and then we'll have a better idea of where they are if you need residency certificates for your clients. Form 1045, application for an individual or tentative refund. They're processing them back from September, and corporations November. Those tend to be more complex returns to process, so that might be a reasonable delay. I don't know. SS4, 9 days if it's a fax submission. That had been up as high as 12, so they're moving that along. Paper submissions have been within 30 days of receipt. I wouldn't submit anything on paper. I would add a minimum fax. And then on the 10th, if they're saying it's a 9-day wait, on the 10th day, I would be calling and saying, "Hey, can I have that number, please?" They will give it to you over the phone. So that's something to consider. Individual correspondence is October 2025. That number has not moved in a month. Business correspondence received in June of 25. Other correspondence received in August of 25. Now, I have to be honest with you, we've had a couple of submissions. We had some items that were submitted in December via certified mail, specifically folks who had $1,400 refund checks that were sent to non-resident aliens erroneously. And for folks that returned the check, IRS didn't catch that it wasn't cash. They still billed people. So in December, we did 2 things for most of those folks. We wrote a letter that said, check your records. The check isn't cash. They never got it. You don't need to claw it back because they weren't supposed to get it to begin with. But secondly, filed CDP hearings for these folks to make sure that we protected their rights. So I got responses to a couple of the CDP hearings today that said, we can see that the account balance is 0 now. We're canceling the CDP hearing. So that says to me they took action on either individual correspondence or other correspondence sent in December that got processed right away. Now, maybe that's because it went to the international unit. I don't know, but I thought that was a pretty reasonable turnaround that in less than 8 weeks, I've got both items done, cleaned up. We've said this before, I'll say it again. Electronic filing is the fastest, it's the most secure. Things are less likely to get lost. Although, yes, there are plenty of stories on the internet right now about folks who e-filed returns in 2021, even 22, and the IRS doesn't have a record. You tell them, but wait, I've got a confirmation, that transaction confirmation for the e-file. Sorry, we don't see the return. You roll your eyes, you're sending in the return again. My favorite, of course, is people that owed and the money wasn't drafted from the account. So why didn't they say something sooner? Paper returns take delays, get lost, get processed incorrectly. We've discussed in past weeks about the IRS reassigning personnel to be able to handle their basic mission critical things like opening the mail, answering the phone. So some of these folks are going to not understand. They're going to miss things. Big nuance, of course, too, again discussed, is since Christmas time, the IRS has notified us that it's not really a policy change, despite being reported that way, that because of the trucking schedules and the way the service centers are going to work, the sorting centers, mail may have the wrong postmark on it. Now, I have something that I know was mailed a week ago. It's got a postmark from the sorting center yesterday, and I got it today. So they're right. So we're waiting in line for even first-class mail items. I'm waiting in line, and someone here is waiting online, and we're having them stamped. Most things are going out to anything other than a government agency is going out via priority mail, even though it's an $8 something cost. And we're sending out anything to a government agency, certified mail, electronic return receipt requested, because at least I know it got there. And I just don't want to have that 1 in 10, 1 in 15 that doesn't get there, and I have to deal with the hassle and to prove it. So, of course, plan ahead to file electronically when you can, ensure all your forms are complete. Now, don't submit duplicate authorization forms. Well, that's a hard one, because if you go back to Chad's comment, stuff I sent 10 days ago that didn't get there, and now they're processing them in 1 day. Is that the stuff that came today got processed and they're working on a backlog? No, something's wrong. So you might want to resubmit in those cases. I get that. Try not to file on paper, but if you have to, allow extra time. And then, of course, processing times are updated weekly. I recommend you look later in the day. If you need that website, by all means, give me a call. Now, or a text or an email. Now, this is something that is tangential to what we do for a living. Your clients are going to ask you about it. The only reason I thought about throwing this in here, first, it really is late breaking. We were doing the 1 o'clock coaching call, and something came up, and Ellie said, "Oh, look, they struck down the president's tariffs." So I ran quickly, and we put together some slides. And your clients are going to ask you about this. I had a new client call for someone I know from a number of other startups. One of the things that we actually do a bunch of, if you said we specialized, is Nordic area startups, especially Copenhagen, coming to the US. And that was because of a connection we made 15 years ago with someone at Deloitte in Denmark, and they send us startup work. She was so happy they got a round of funding, they can hire me. I can't remember the last time somebody was excited to hire me. But anyway, so a big part of our conversation was tariffs, because they're importing items from China through Copenhagen or Denmark and then sending them out. So clients are talking about these things. So 6-3 ruling invalidated the IEEPA-based tariffs, and that triggered $160 billion worth of refunds. I can hear the fraud and see the fraudulent emails now. You're due $2,000, $5,000. Click here to give me your information to get your tariff refund. It's going to be bad for a while. But so your clients should know that's not how this works. All right. Big ruling is, I missed that. Big ruling is learning resources versus Trump. Supreme Court held 6-3 that the Emergency Economic Powers Act, which is what President Trump leaned on to create these tariffs, it doesn't authorize him to impose tariffs on imported goods. So they consolidated two cases, and this is the most significant judicial check in decades, where the executive branch did something and the court's just saying, not so much. So the Tax Foundation, which is where some of this information comes from, I don't get everything off of Politico and The Hill, they said that had the tariffs survived, they were going to generate $1.4 trillion in revenue through 2034, which, if you count that as a tax increase, it was the largest percentage increase in as a percentage of gross domestic product. But probably we're looking at these funds to offset some of the other tax cuts we've given folks. So this may create some other problems. So what do we strike down? Everything isn't struck down. A lot of stuff is. What they're calling the Liberation Day tariffs, the reciprocal tariffs on other countries that range from 10 to 50%. Border security, we were charging 10% on Chinese imports, 25% on many Mexico-sourced items, and 35% on non-USMCA Canada items. So I think that's limited to like 10% on energy, right? So Russia and Brazil have had targeted tariffs; they're overturned, and the de minimis exception has been restored. So the exemption for low-cost imports from countries was reinstated. You know how you can buy those things from that they ship them directly from China to you? This is why they don't come through the ports in a container. They come through regular mail, no tariff. That's why they can send it to you directly. That's why they can be so competitive. And that's why these items can come through the mail or what appears to be the mail in some local private van who shows up and delivers your stuff. So what did survive? So Section 232 tariffs. I have no idea what Section 232 was until I read this. So it doesn't affect certain industry-specific tariffs under Section 232 that were imposed due to national security. Steel and aluminum has a 25% tariff coming in, right? Inbound steel and aluminum. Automobiles, inbound, 25% tariff on passenger vehicles. Heavy trucks have a similar 25% tariff. So these tariffs generate $635 billion over the next decade. They will cost you and me an average of $400 in 2026. I would suspect if you bought a new car, that's a lot higher than $400 of your share. Now, this is where I think the fraud is going to come in. That leaves $160 billion with a B that has to be repaid. They're now saying the court has said these were collected without legal authority, so they have to go back. $133.5 billion was collected through December 14th. They have an estimated total of $160 billion through the ruling date, right? We just know what that last reported date was. So 3/4 of the revenue that had been projected to come in from these new tariffs is got to go back. Now, the Supreme Court doesn't get involved with the equity portion of this, right? It's a court of law. They send it back. Supreme Court remanded the case back to the U.S. Court of International Trade, and they will figure out and manage the refund process. Like I said, it's going to be a whole lot of poor people that are going to have fraud here as they fall victim to different scams. I'm sure tonight, tomorrow, you'll see the first poorly worded English scam in an email. So if you have importer clients, you might want to tell them to start putting together the documentation. What did they pay? Who did they pay it? How can they prove it? Entry summaries, duty payment records. A lot of, especially your smaller clients, are using custom brokers, meaning not customs, I should say, right? These are the folks that handle the container coming in and get it through the process for you, get it through the port and get it through those folks who look at the tariff stuff. Can't think of who they're called. The government should make this process simple and transparent, but who knows what's going to happen? Who knows how it's going to be done? Who knows if they're going to appeal and appeal and appeal? So the ruling gives immediate relief. They're going to have to stop collecting these tariffs. but the administration still has broad authority, and maybe they're going to impose a new tariff. There are four alternate mechanisms I'm going to show you. 12 new trade investigations are underway, and there are threats targeting semiconductors and pharmaceuticals. This has been going on. The question isn't whether there's going to be new tariffs, but under which authority and how quickly. So here are a couple. So Section 232 we talked about is the national security threat. There's no rate cap. They can charge what they think needs to be charged. Section 301 is if discriminatory practices. We think the other country is doing something unfair to us, so we can impose a tariff. Section 122 is called balance of payment, and that's the most is 15%, requires congressional approval, which takes about 150 days when you look at the public hearings that are required. This has never been invoked. Section 338 looks at discriminatory practices. That's a 10% maximum rate, also never been invoked by a U.S. president. So what remains? EPA, we know that EPA can't authorize a tariff. That's the ruling. That's clear that EPA can't do that. The $160 billion are coming. Make a determination, though it's not going to go directly to taxpayers. That's probably, but not certainly, something I'm going to get out in a text today. Hey, in case you read the Supreme Court ruling, it's not going to be direct to people. Don't fall for scams. Don't look at social media that says you're due $2,000, $5,000. Not true. That's not how this works. Anything that was imposed under 232 is not affected here. And of course, we're gonna be watching the news to see what happens. So there's immediate relief. It'll be interesting to see what that does to pricing. I know whenever gas seems to go down 20% wholesale, it sure doesn't go down 20% retail, even though when it goes the other way, it does go all the way up, right? They don't drop those prices so quickly. Too bad we're not importing anything. We could keep our prices high and get some relief on our margins. So 2026, early tax season numbers are in. Now remember that prior to February 15th, certain large refunds aren't released. Refunds with child-related credits are under the PATH Act are delayed until after that date, starting about that date. So right now we're comparing early season this year to early season last year. Super interesting. The average refund is up over 10%, and which was kind of expected due to no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, with the $6,000 senior deduction, no tax on overtime, and that surprising auto interest deduction thrown in with the Wild West stuff. Put down whatever you want and see if you get caught. Because if you read social media, I'm tired of it. I don't know how we're this far into it, and we're still explaining to practitioners how to do no tax on overtime. 22 million returns are in the door. That's down a 5% decrease from last year. Why is that a decrease? A whole lot of people may not have worked last year because of the immigration policy. A whole lot of folks are not going to qualify for the earned income credit. They're not going to qualify for, if they're ITIN holders, they're not going to qualify for the child tax credit. They're only going to get this year, they'll get the other dependent credit. 20.6 million returns have been processed, also down from last year by 12%. Now that could be because of the late start date, right? Plenty of returns still went in, but we didn't start processing them, and you can only process so many of the clip. 7.4 million refunds issued, down 8% over last year. And again, we're comparing February 6th to February 6th. These are the IRS filing statistics that they periodically release. They should start releasing them weekly, I think, through the end of tax season. So the early filers, again, most of these folks, no earned income credit. Average refund, $2,290 versus $2,065. I've said this before, the next 2 or 3 years, wow, up. And then what's going to happen in 2029, unless they retain some of these new credits and deductions, mostly, it's going to go down. Child tax credit, remember, went to $2,200 this year from $2,000. It's also going to be indexed. I suspect your early filing season numbers will continue to go up because we're indexing the child tax credit, among other things. Okay. Total refund is up. Total amounts refunded up 1.9% total. If you like to look at that graphically, courtesy of the Tax Foundation, very nice. The numbers are a little bit off from the IRS numbers, probably due to rounding. If you like to look at a comparative graphic, this is really cool. So the numbers on the bottom, the horizontal or y-axis, that's the IRS reporting period. So the first reporting period is going to vary a little bit by year based on when they started. Now you can see that there's no 2026 number in the first period. Why? We started 2 years late. We started late, right? 2 weeks late. But then you can see in the subsequent reporting period, the numbers are higher. So it's going to be very interesting to see where this goes if they remain higher all the way across the axis as these come out. I don't know that Tax Foundation puts this out every week. If they don't, we'll dump this into one of the AIs for you, and we'll generate our own report because that's what AIs are for, right? If you want to see these numbers in a table, here you go. So why are some of these numbers going to shift? We said that PATH Act refunds that include earned income credit and the additional child tax credit, the refundable credits, are legally held until at least February 15th. Most of those refunds are hitting March 2nd. So I don't know which of the early filers. Anyway, I don't know which ones, which week that will show up in. The week they process the refund, the week they release the refund. I don't know. We'll find out, right? Early filers tend to have simpler returns, no credits or just the child tax credit. And so they skew the average refund upward. As the more complex returns go in, those of us that have to pay, those of us without credits, as all of these things start to hit the pipeline, that average is likely to moderate a bit and get closer to the mean. It should still be higher than prior years, but it's going to get closer to the historical numbers. All right. Should you set expectations that the numbers people are seeing in the paper, in the media are higher? Yeah, I might, especially, so that person who says to you, I have people that come back and ask, why is it lower? They don't complain. They're just like, I worked the same job, I did the same thing, and we talk them through it. But somebody who says, well, the average is $2,290, and I'd be happy with the average because that's better than the $1,000 you got me this year. And you take them through that. So some of the messaging is going to be that, hey, that number's out, and that's not representative of you. That's not representative of the complexity of your return. I don't know. But again, I tell you these things because they are out there, and your clients may talk to you about it. Now, the 5.2% drop in returns received could simply reflect the calendar timing. We started later. People have had less weekends to do their tax returns, assuming they work on the weekends or their day off. And it may not be a permanent drop. It could also be a permanent drop because, again, people that aren't getting those big refunds, they could be wandering around 2, 3, 4, 5 practitioners. Folks I talk to who work with a lot of clients that are refund, we used to call them money needers that block. But folks who rely on that refund, look for that refund, they may shop around if they're not happy with the refund you said you'd get. I think a lot of people didn't work. I think a lot of people are afraid that if their numbers, their current address gets into the system, it may get to other government agencies that they are not looking for. So people may be afraid to file or not want to file. I don't know. But we'll see. We'll see how this progresses because I hope at some point we see a statistic telling us that how many less ITIN holders have filed, and that will send a message. All right. So this kind of fell out of the news with so many other things that are going on, and as practitioners, this sort of affects us. So I thought it would be important to talk about it. I don't know if any of you are navigators as part of your practice, you get insurance credits, you navigate for your state. But the tax credit never got extended, and it's fallen. And now it's looking, and some of the blogs, political blogs, are saying it looks unlikely that they're going to extend it this year. 20 million people are affected by this. Now, one quick thought is that, and I've said this before, 2013, the Affordable Care Act gave us 20 new taxes to fund the affordable care, to fund the premium tax credits. Now, 19 of them still exist. In his first term, President Trump wiped away the individual shared responsibility credit. Now, that alone, in addition to being a source of revenue by itself, it was also designed to encourage young, healthy people to pay premiums and have insurance, which in theory should lower all of our costs. So, but the other 19 taxes, including the 3.8% NIT, the 0.9% additional Medicare tax, still exist, and the federal government is still collecting that in your tax return. You don't see that NIT line blank, right? That says suspended, expired. No, we're still paying that. So very interesting what's happening, that they have the money there that was specifically enacted for the credit, but not stapled to the credit. That would have been very interesting if they lost the revenue as well. So I'm going to tell you what's going on here and why. We'll talk about it, kind of quickly. So it officially expired at the end of 2025. We talked about that. The train has left the station, Ron Wyden said. That's our friend in Oregon, the Senate Finance Ranking Member. He's a Democrat. He said the train has left the station, and then Bernie Moreno, not Bernie Sanders, Bernie Moreno, said that negotiations were done. That's just terrible. You can tell when it's not an election year. The House efforts continued, though, even though the Senate is not doing anything. They're trying to get something that's workable. A House bill advanced and had 17 Republican co-sponsors for a retroactive 3-year extension, but everything else has been dead on arrival in the Senate. Who's affected? 20 million Americans. Now, that doesn't mean 20 million households, a husband, a wife, or two married spouses. I shouldn't be sexist. A married couple and their 2 children, that's 4 people, right? 1 taxpayer, 1 household with 4 children. The enhanced credit was critical here and helped these folks afford it. And these were folks that are above the Medicaid eligibility thresholds, allowed them to purchase insurance they otherwise might not afford. So what's happened here? I hate when all the literature refers to it as the premium increase. The average Affordable Care Act premiums are expected to more than double without the credit. It's really the out-of-pocket cost. The premiums are the same. It's just there's no credit to offset it. 2.2 million people are expected to lose health insurance entirely due to the overall affordability. And 20 million Affordable Care Act marketplace enrollees are impacted by the expiration. So this creates two levels of crisis. Those who remain enrolled have these higher costs, and then 2.2 million people are expected to drop coverage entirely because they can no longer afford it, which in theory increases later life costs, Medicaid costs, costs your county property tax as these otherwise the care that has to be given. What otherwise could have been handled in the doctor's office or otherwise would have been avoided by routine medical care now ends up in the emergency room with higher costs and less desirable outcomes. If you watch The Pit, there's a whole side plot. One of the smaller plots is this fellow who's diabetic and he stopped taking his medication. He and the wife both work 2 jobs. They work more than 40 hours a week each. No health insurance anywhere. They can't afford health insurance. He can't afford his medication. And everybody's amazed. They don't deal with or address anybody's status or the issue, their immigration status, which I think is the point. Here's a regular family of regular hardworking people, no insurance because they can't afford it. They don't mention the credits. Probably the show was already recorded by then, but I can just see them mentioning the credits otherwise. Democrats, Republicans have 2 different visions. And if you go back 2 years when we were talking about the research and development, immediate expensing of R&D costs by the Republicans, and the Democrats wanted to see the advance child tax credit come back. They're on both sides, completely opposite here on the spectrum with this stuff. So Democrats just want a straight up extension. Everything was fine the way it was. Let's go back to that. No riders, no changes, no anything. Now, the Republicans argue the program is ripe with fraud, and fuels profits for insurance companies. Well, I don't see how more people affording insurance and access to healthcare is a problem here. You don't. There's two separate issues here: people having healthcare and how we're funding it. So don't take one away while you argue about the other. The Democrat position has been, let's just move forward with this. Don't change it. Subsidy levels, leave everything. Enhance the subsidy levels a bit, but no other strings related to reform, at least right now. Republicans have said extension only, but with all of these changes. There have been 5 different bills proposing eligibility caps, elimination of $0 premiums, and pairing a temporary extension with some federally funded health savings accounts. Now, that's pretty clear that in general they're looking to do that because OBA, among other things, OBA provided that a bronze plan is automatically a catastrophic plan, high deductible plan, however you want to phrase it, and eligible to coordinate with a health savings account. I think that's a great thing. I bet you the next thing you see is a saver's credit applied to the health savings accounts to get folks to save this way. So right now they can't find a compromise. They're just deadlocked, and then they all went home for another week. Right? Lovely people. Key items for the Republican side: end $0 premiums, cut off eligibility at a defined income threshold, so higher income households can't access this enhanced subsidy. Okay, you're going to just change the threshold. That's fine. Temporary credit extension with federally funded HSAs. So meaning the federal government would put some money into the HSA, and that would shift toward a consumer direct coverage model. We'll see what happens. So this is not meant to be political, but this is to tell you what's going on in the Senate. The problem here is the Hyde Amendment. This is a federal policy that bans the use of federal funds to finance abortions. Republicans are insisting that any renewal of the premium tax credit must comply with Hyde. So you're going to take away women's reproductive health issues, I guess. And this is going to mean no subsidy dollars flow towards abortion-related coverage. Senator Moreno has proposed legislation requiring an annual audit of ACA health plans to make sure that they are not using federal tax dollars to do that. And that would help them have compliance with Hyde. The Republicans say this is non-deductible. Now, the Republicans are saying anything to do with Hyde is a non-starter here. It's an attempt to restrict reproductive health care access through a must-pass subsidy bill, right? We're here at the impasse, and if you want to do this in the middle of the night, you're going to sign off on what we want. So neither side is willing to give. We're at that point now. And Representative Brian Fitzpatrick, representative, of course, he's a member of the House, has said that that's the hang-up in the Senate. All right, so I'm not going to beat you up with this, but here's the timeline of what's going on and what we can expect. All right, so we're watching this for you. We've mentioned it before. This isn't something I think we need a weekly update on. I think it's important because, again, are your clients asking you about these things? Mine do. I've plenty of folks who are worried about what's going to happen. Are they going to lose access to it? Are they going to? We have folks getting Medicaid that are New York's a Medicaid expansion state. Most of our clients are Medicaid expansion states. So folks are asking questions because it's on everyone's mind. So I want to talk about IP pins a little bit, only because there was an IRS news release on this, and there were a couple of social media posts by confused people related to the somebody else claimed my dependent thing. And posters are asking, what do I need to attach to the paper return? And I mistakenly wrote, wait, since last year, you've been able to get an IP pin and you don't need to file a paper return. And a bunch of people agreed with me. And other people were like, what? So I went back, I looked, and this was a recent release. And I said, well, let's talk about this just a little bit. Again, this is more informational than putting you to sleep here. But there were a couple of things that I thought were important, including this pathway out. And I want to talk about the dependent pins for duplicate filings. So we're going to talk about how you can enroll, how you can fix a modern e-file reject, what you can do if there's a duplicate dependent, and how you can get your IP pin, but in a couple of cases, how you can't, which is super important to talk about. All right, so IP pin is a 6-digit number. It's designed to be a shared secret. You know it, the IRS knows it. And it can be used on the 1040 series of returns. And it applies to all the returns I filed during this year. So if I am a non-filer and I'm going to file 6 years worth of returns to get you current, I get one IP pin that goes on all 6 returns. I don't need to worry about what was the IP pin for those respective years. Anything I file in 2026, I'm going to use the January 2026 IP pin. If you go way back, I mean, we're starting here with the pre-2021 victims. If you go way back, you had to be a victim of identity theft. Then they expanded it and said, well, if you live in Florida, Georgia, and someplace else where there was a lot of fraud, you can get an IP pin as well. So pins were issued exclusively to those with a confirmed identity theft. Then it expanded. 2021, it was voluntarily expanded. And we talked about it, but I think a lot of our clients didn't do it. But I've started seeing in recent years lots of folks coming, more coming in with a letter than there used to be. We have folks who have identity theft issues. We have folks who, the wife, the spouse says, so-and-so filed a return and I didn't sign it, or they don't always say this. It says, I didn't see it, I didn't have any part of it. Okay, great, maybe you didn't file. Step 1, report it to the police, you're a victim of identity theft. Step 2, file a 14039. Let's get you set up to prove later, as soon as you found out you were a victim, we filed for it. So we're seeing more and more of these. 2025 and 2026, the last, which is for the 24 and 25 filing seasons, if there's a duplicate dependent and my return rejects, I can bypass that e-file reject if I can get the IP pin for that person. So this is going to change a lot of things, but mostly it changes those paper returns that never get processed, don't get processed right, require lots of follow-up, or under math authority, they tore everything you attached to the return away, filed it, and said, that kid's been claimed, and used math authority to adjust the refund, right? That's going to go away. Now, is somebody going to get audited, or both somebody's get audited? Good chance, but that's neither here nor there, right? Step 1, get it done. So if you opt in online, you don't get the CP01 in the mail. You have to retrieve the new PIN every January off the website. This is mailed in mid-December through early January. It takes 3 weeks to get them out. And this is for people who did not opt in for online access. All right. So there's a distinct method. There are 3 distinct methods for IP PIN enrollment. And each one is geared towards a combination of different circumstances or different people. 60% of the applications received exceeded the standard 120-day processing window. No kidding, we showed you that. Online enrollment is the preferred way to do this. You're continuously enrolled in this. You're re-enrolled automatically each year. Or you can choose one-time enrollment, which is I just wanted this year. And that requires active re-enrollment. Again, I don't see how this is a bad idea, and I think once they're enrolled, they should be in it forever. And I think that one day we're going to find out that that this is what they're going to add. We're all going to have this. And you're going to have to either go online and get your PIN every year, or they're going to add shared secrets to the tax return. They're just going to have to. So there's 3 methods here to access this. Online tool via ID.me. Get an IP PIN using the ID, the biometric verification, and you'll have to do a video selfie. You get the PIN immediately. It's the fastest option. You can file a Form 15227, or you can file go to the TAC. Now, you have to schedule that in advance. You have to bring 2 forms of ID, and then they mail you the PIN. Now, as we know, the in-person tax, they're closing a lot of the tax. So taxpayer assistance centers. So I don't know that that's really an option except for the most severe cases, maybe. 15227, by the way, the IRS is going to call your phone number and verify your identity. PINs are mailed 4 to 6 weeks later. Your AGI has to be under the threshold shown, which is indexed. Otherwise, you're not supposed to do the paper form. You're supposed to use the online tool. Now, some folks who I didn't know this until we did this research. Some folks who voluntarily entered the IP PIN program may want to opt out. Don't know why, but they might. So there's a detail that we have to remember. There's a latency. It takes time for all their systems to update and show John had a PIN, John doesn't have a PIN. They tell you have to wait 72 hours before you e-file. This lets all the IRS systems that are connected synchronize and understand you don't have an IP PIN. Now, if you file before the window closes, you're going to trigger a rejection, as the master file still sees that you have to have an IP PIN here. Of course, it doesn't. They don't tell you, oh, now you have to paper file, right? They don't want that. If your opt-out timing overlaps with the April 15th deadline, IRS recommends you file an extension. And we already said this, that to paper file, your income has to be below $84,000 if you're single, $168,000 if you're married filing jointly. If you exceed those thresholds, you're supposed to use the online tool or walk into a TAC. So here's the meat of today's program. Dependent IP PINs and the duplicate dependent protection. IP PINs aren't limited to primary taxpayers. Dependents have been able to get them for years, as has the spouse. So minor children can and should obtain them, especially to protect the credits, the earned income credit, the child tax credit. So the big shift 2025 and 2026 is how this is going to be handled in the e-file system. So in the past, the first to file rule, historically the IRS rejected the subsequent tax return that claimed the same dependent, and that forced this person to file on paper, attach all their stuff, attach a cover letter, months of delay, sometimes a year, and then it was unresolved until the manual review. Now, with this IPIN acceptance idea, if a dependent has the IP PIN, the IRS will accept the second return claiming that dependent electronically, provided the correct PIN is included. This locks the child to the rightful claimant's return and forces the IRS to reconcile the dispute through standard channels. This eliminates the need for a delayed paper return. Clients with custody arrangements should get these IP PINs for their children, and it's going to simplify e-filing and protect their refundable credits. Now, if the child is under the age of 10, you need a TAC appointment or a 15227. The parent or guardian has to do 2 layers of verification here. First, they have to prove who they are. They have to authenticate using their own ID. Then they have to prove how they're related to the child. So if it's my natural child, the birth certificate says John and Lindsay. I can show them that. If they're adopted, there might be other paperwork. I'm going to provide that documentation, 2 forms of ID for the dependent. That's going to be hard. Birth certificate and social security card. Ooh, I have those, right? And then certain healthcare provider documentation. We can go into that if we need it, but I really believe most children will have the social security card and the birth certificate. Minor dependent IP PINs aren't retrievable online. If it's lost, you have to call the IRS Specialized Assistance Line for issuance. No self-service option for minors. Now, if you think about this is to protect them, right? It's going to be mailed to the address of the person who applied for the IP PIN, right? The other parent is not going to be able to get that. I gave you here the codes that talk about how the rejects work and the reject codes that you get. Again, I won't waste your time discussing it, but those bottom 2 are most important to us, 995, 996. Right? The authentication is missing or the authentication doesn't match. Try the PIN again. Reject resolution, when reject occurs, what code is it? Figure it out. Verify if you need to. Resubmit that return. Now, we can't request IPINs on behalf of our clients. So it's just like a social security number. And of course, we mentioned already that if you think the mail time is going to overlap with April 15th, proactively file that extension. You can do that for your client. Be aware that there's an October 14th cutoff. The IRS will not reissue an IP PIN by mail after October 14th if they have not yet filed. If you opted into the program after 2019, you're ineligible for a mailed reissuance. They have to use the online tool. So the question here becomes, if you're going to promote clients get IP PINs, you've got to integrate that somehow into your intake. We may talk about this in November, next November, in getting the office ready. A lot of your clients might need help. One of the biggest problems to adoption of the online tools is getting into ID.me, getting folks set up with that. All of our mismatches, we're using the duplicate dependent rule. I don't think you need to know those reject codes. I looked them up. And be aware of the 72-hour latency on the opt-out and the October 14th mail reissuance date. Thank you again for attending. I really appreciate when you folks are able to spend Friday with me. I feel a little bit like Mr. Rogers when I do this. But there's some Q&A. Let's hit the Q&A real quick. See who would like to ask what. Any idea to find out current lists of what has and has been posted to wage and income, like you find the current status of processing? The answer is no, but what we tell a lot of folks to do is if we can't find something, they can go into the portal and usually find the document or representation of the document. The IRS has historically said, during tax season, these aren't the final wage and income transcripts. June or July, sometimes as early as May, they used to start posting them, but it wouldn't be till later in the year they told you that they were final. So I would say nothing is final, Katie, but I don't have an idea for you on how to know what is there other than pull the transcript. Manjeet, my understanding is both, right? Because if you remember, the IRS, in theory, doesn't operate fax machines anymore. So all that same stuff is going into a same queue and being processed. Now, we thought the same thing during COVID. We said they have to be using AI. And then we heard, well, maybe not. These were Mr. Reddick's surge teams, right? When something got behind, he sent in all sorts of bodies from other departments to get caught up. So it's not clear to me how they've got it caught up. I think this would be a perfect use for AI, to be honest with you. But I understand both. But I would say to you is, why are you faxing stuff in? I would be uploading everything. You get that immediate acknowledgement that it's there and in their system. Any idea how long it takes to get your PIN associated with your CAF, with your Tax Pro account? I don't know. All right, so you can link your CAF into your Tax Pro account, everybody, so that then you can see all of your people online. So someone here did one, and I want to say it took like 2.5 weeks to get the letter, but that was a couple of months ago. So I can't say for sure. I would say if you don't have it, a lot of times they tell you 10 days, right, from when you request this stuff. So if you don't have it within 2 to 3 weeks, I'd be on the phone, and remember that they're looking for you to do this stuff electronically. So I would hope you're going to get the help with connecting it. Appeal to whom? Only Congress has the right. Will they take up the tariff issues with the midterms coming up in November of 26? I don't know where the other half of that conversation was. I don't remember. But yeah, we know that that's what we need to do is on tariffs. Oops. All right. IP PIN. What if a taxpayer has over 84 income but are computer illiterate? How do they get a paper IP PIN? Ouch. My suggestion, Katie, would be maybe they can come in and sit next to you. You can't apply for them, but maybe they can sit next to you and you can say to them, now, what's your name, Mr. Smith? What's your date of birth? You know that, Katie. I have to ask, and I think that would be fine, right? You just can't do it without him there. You want Mr. Smith there. And then probably, you're going to have to help him. Hopefully he has a smartphone. Can you apply for a minor IP PIN in the same year that the tax is rejected? My understanding is yes, because this was a big deal last year, is after it rejected, if you can go get the IP PIN, you'd be able to do that. So I think the answer is yes. If somebody knows that that's wrong, you should let me know. Hello again, Bill. Is there a fix when the IP PIN client can't log into your account because ID Me says there's been fraud on their account? I don't know. If you email me that, I'll pass it on to my taxpayer liaison. Email me all the specifics except the taxpayer name, all right? And I can pass that on. At least the one thing about doing all these Agostino events for free, getting them broadcast, is I get to meet a lot of people at the IRS. So I'll ask and let's see what we can do. So email me that, please. And that will end today's program. Thank you all for coming. And I look forward to seeing you next week. If you want to see anything in the program that we're not covering, email me early to middle of the week. I generally put this together on Thursday nights and finalize it Friday morning while I wait for some of those IRS numbers. So if you see anything, you see an article you think we should talk about or cover, or you're aware of a topic, just email me, message me, text me, whatever you want to do. That number you see on the screen, the 859-5500 number, is text enabled, and we'll see that too. All right? So everybody have a great weekend. Thanks for joining us.